Okay. All right. Should be live and recording. Still hear me good, Brett?
Yep, I got you.
Okay, cool. We are doing that, and we have
All right.
some
Yep.
participants rolling in. So we're gonna let, for the next couple of minutes, folks filter in. We did get over I think at or above the 500 mark. So we're excited for everybody joining in. It's a beautiful day here, and we've got a lot of good research for the spring and a summer preview out there as well. So Brett, how's your day going so far?
Hey, it's going pretty good. Excited to do this. We put a lot of time and effort into the spring forecast and the early summer sneak peek. We're going to talk about a little bit more than we have in the past. Severe weather this year. That's something that has had a lot of interest, and we wanted to include in the webinar. So we're excited to show you all some of our research, both from the agriculture standpoint, but also from severe weather for schools and EMAs and whoever else may be joining in on the webinar today.
Yeah. Of course, guys. We're gonna do about 30 more seconds to let participants and attendees filter in. So I'm Kirk Hens. I'm the CEO meteorologist over here at BAM Weather, and we're based out of Indianapolis. We're a private consulting weather firm across industry, wide. Anybody that basically deals with weather. I've got Brett Waltz, our chief communications officer here, and Brett does everything. So if that's just not his not his title, he does everything: short range, long range weather, all of our marketing stuff. So I'm awesome, and I'm very glad to have him join us here. And I would also, guys, please use that Q&A or the chat, whichever you prefer to ask your questions. We will wait until the end to answer all of those. So don't not put them in there. We do see them. Just know that we're going to wait until the very end to answer those, and we always do. And we're going to give a plenty amount of time to go ahead and do that. So without further ado, I am going to share my screen here, Brett, and we're going to be off with the races here. So, okay. So let me know, which screen are you seeing, Brett? Are we seeing the presentation?
Yep, you got the right one.
Okay, so I'm gonna hey, first time to charm. I'm gonna go full screen. Look good?
Yep, it looks great.
Okay, awesome, guys. Well, again, I'm Kirk Hens. I've got Brett Waltz here. Maybe if you're just now filtering in, this is the first webinar ever, and I'm super excited. Brett had this idea yesterday, and I think it's a fantastic idea that these webinars, which we're actually going to have 4. We're going to have one now. I think the next one in May for the summer, and then kind of filtering out the next 2 to 3 months for fall and wintertime. But we have a sponsor, Mr. Bob Hartso with Sylvius Insurance Group here. They are a crop insurance local to Indiana group here that service many folks for the crop insurance needs. So we are so thankful for Sylvius Insurance Group and Bob over there and his team for being the official paid sponsor of this, and all of them for the rest of the year. So make sure to give them a shout. There's his contact information there, 574-933-3930, and then his email. If you're in the ag space, they would absolutely love to help you guys out. So this is the first one of the year, 22-23 planting in severe weather webinar. I like the severe weather part of this, Brett, because today's a perfect example, and tomorrow we have severe weather, and it's going to be frequent. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, one of the reasons that we included it in this webinar is because we got off to such a fast start with severe weather this year. We had, I think it was January, there were tornadoes in Illinois. I think it was the furthest north that tornadoes had been recorded that early in the year. And
multiple tornadoes.
Yeah, multiple tornadoes. And it's really just continued on. And now we've got a 2-day severe weather event, down like in parts of Arkansas today, Mississippi Valley, and then tomorrow, all the way up into the Ohio Valley. I should have included some slides about that on here. We're going to focus more on the extended range, but guys, severe weather season is starting off fast. And I do think that this spring poses a higher risk than normal to have a more active severe weather season.
Yeah, absolutely. Anytime that we're coming out of a sustained state in ENSO, 3-year La Nina, we're going to get into what does that mean, where are we going here in the slides ahead. But the atmosphere is going to go into a shock mode, and we're going to see that shock mode, I think, easily over the next couple of months starting today. So great segue as we kind of move forward. Brett, why don't you kick us off here in terms of our prelim last year? So this is our growing season forecast here right in the middle in the result here. What do we see?
Yeah, so this is the summer outlook. Really, from this time last year, it was March 2nd, so it was a little bit later than right now. But I share this on here mainly because we want to demonstrate to everybody that you can forecast seasonally. It is certainly difficult, and it's certainly impossible to get them all right. But certainly, if you look out from this time last year when we were looking at last summer, the forecast overall panned out very well. It was very warm across the plains in the western part of the country. We actually even had the slightly cooler risk where it ended up more seasonable in
Spot
the
on.
Great Lakes. And then the plains dryness. That was the big story about last summer. And really, we had that nailed pretty well.
Yep.
All the way from last March. So again, just showing this to demonstrate that, hey, the tools are there to be able to forecast seasonally 2-3 months out. And we will have a sneak peek for summer later on in this webinar.
Yeah. Keep an eye on that green risk area. These days everybody's like, well, derecho, that's like the key word here. And it does seem like we get a lot more MCSs or storm clusters. So you almost, no matter if it's a La Nina or El Nino, you have to include that risk because it always seems to pan out in that area in the Midwest too. So I don't think we're going to not see that this year. I think it's something that very well could be prevalent for sure. So I'm going to kick this off here, kind of like what you had mentioned. So this is, correct me if I'm wrong. Yeah. So this is all the way up into basically yesterday, severe weather reports since January 1st. And is this record, Brett? Correct me if I'm wrong, close to record?
Yeah, it's close. I think we've fallen behind 2008 now. I think 2008 is the fastest start. So I think we're second or third right now in the past 20, 25 years or so, as far as when these records started to be kept more consistently. But regardless, a very fast start to the year. I mean, there have been a couple of years recently where there were hardly any severe weather reports out through February and early March. So this is different than what we've had the past several years. And here's a good example of it. As far as the tornado, specifically the tornado reports, that red line there is this year. The purple one above that, I believe that's 2008. It's the only year that's higher right now than this year. There are a couple of other ones that are close in there. I think maybe, what's that second one there? I can't really tell
2017?
what the second one is.
Yeah,
2017. Yeah, that makes sense. 2017, you can see there, the top 5 most active starts to severe weather season on record: 08, 23, 17, 2020, 2012. And 3 of those years stand out to me, Kirk, because 2008, 2017 and 2012 were all coming off of La Ninas, and 17 and 12 in particular had a very similar ENSO state at this time to where we are at.
No coincidence. Yeah, no coincidence too. And also, like we just mentioned, today, tomorrow, we're going to add to that. We're going to add to those reports. So it just wouldn't shock me if we just get even closer to 2008, and this won't be our last one. I mean, geez.
Yeah, it's going to spike up the next couple of days.
Yeah, it is for sure too. So I love this slide that you created. Why don't you give them a breakdown? We're not going to get, guys, here's the one thing too that I love that we do. We're not going to get mega technical in terms of, hey, what is MJO? What's the mega science behind this? But I do think, and I'm going to let Brett explain this, MJO, Matt and Julian oscillation. Why does this matter to severe weather? I think this is super important. Kick us off with this.
Yeah, so basically what the MJO is, it's just an area of thunderstorms along the equator. So we can just simply think of it as that. And those thunderstorms, there's a lot of upward motion and it impacts the jet stream. And because it impacts the jet stream, it can directly impact our weather here in the US. So we go back in time and look at similar setups, and we can see that where we're headed, where those thunderstorms are moving, it's going to impact the jet stream in a way that's going to favor increased severe weather potential. We're already seeing that. I mean, this area here that's in red, I know it says the end of Feb. I guess we're already towards the back half of Feb, but we're already seeing this increased severe weather threat right now from the Mississippi Valley up into the Ohio Valley. And I really think that is going to continue to be an issue to end February and to start out March. Again, we mentioned 2012 and 2017, not necessarily great analogs persistently throughout spring and summer. I want to make that very clear, because I know when you throw out that 2012 year, people get, hear
that. Yeah.
But yeah. I think it's an analog, at least for the next couple of weeks. So at least for the next couple of weeks, we need to look at these years. And there were big severe weather outbreaks early on in late February and early March, early spring in these years. Now, it doesn't mean that it's one-to-one. Could it be the Ohio Valley? It could be the Tennessee Valley. No way to know. But the chances are increased compared to normal to end February
Yeah.
and the first couple of weeks of March, probably.
I mean, that makes sense too. And to set the record straight, when we say a year like 2012, you really would not have seen the drought in 2012 if you would have seen the spring of 2012. I mean, it was very active. There were months where in a lot of places it was above normal in precipitation. So there's no way really you would have seen that crystal clear that the following month's precipitation was going to shut off. Now, um, and we're going to get into what to look for in cases where that may shut off or it may continue to be wetter. And we're going to get into that in the slides ahead. But when, in 2011, in 2012, we were getting out of a La Nina. And so the atmosphere was going through that shock. We're going through a shock now. The jet streams are kicking on. So you're adding in cold air and hot air and you're clashing those air masses. So it makes a lot of sense that in those similar scenarios, like, 08 and 2012, et cetera, that's what happened then too. So what was interesting thing to me too, when we showed that second slide, was how many tornado reports this year we've seen here. In fact, let me just kind of go back here, just so folks, that's a lot of red on there here. With La Ninas, I feel like we get a lot of hail. We get a lot of wind reports, tornado reports, maybe on the lower end here. But this, and correct me if I'm wrong, this may suggest maybe we see an uptick in those. Why do you think that is, or what's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think that it's a combination going into March of that shock that you talked about of starting to get out of La Nina that we've been in. Enough La Nina forcing that the jet streams are still clashing, that we're still favoring that kind of that gradient in temperatures, cold to the north and warm to the south. But on top of that, because of how we're seeing things evolve with the tropical forcing, that just kind of increases the chances a little bit further north. There's a lot of research about the tropical forcing that we're going to be seeing that favors increased severe weather threats. And again, we're already starting to see it. Would not be shocked to see maybe a bigger severe weather outbreak at some point, guys, late February, early March. It's speculation at this point. Obviously, we're still weeks out.
I bet I don't even know if I'd call it speculation. I'm just basing off of today, and that gradient looks better than it is today. So
well, it's speculation in terms of where it will be.
That's true.
Exactly.
That is true. Not necessarily that there will be.
Is it the Ohio Valley or is it the Tennessee Valley? That was it 2017, and there was one in 2019 where it was Nashville. There were tornadoes that went through there.
That's right.
So,
it's possible.
Feel confident above normal. Where exactly? We got to get a little bit closer to find out.
This is impressive here, because when I think about, and again, barring last year, we had a hot start, and this confirms this. We had a hot start to severe weather last year, and then we went into La Nina and it shut off. The jet streams were more capped off here, but this confirms the last handful of years, last 4 or 5 years, it just hasn't been super active. So I find this super interesting that this simply says a change is possible. And even more to the start of last year too. So it makes a lot of sense, but I get a lot of questions like, hey, it seems like we just haven't had a lot of severe weather over the last 4 or 5 years. This is the confirmation of that. In my opinion, probably a result of the lack of jet stream in activity. And that just simply means a lack of clashing of air masses. For those that are interested, the simple term of why that's happened. We've been in a La Nina the last 3 years, or for the most part of the last half decade. So this is us basically saying, in a nutshell, not to spend too much time on this, that there's a change happening, and typically that change happens. There's more severe weather.
Yep, for sure. A lot of people think that La Nina causes the severe weather. It's coming out of it into the spring. Is that change as the jets start to fluctuate? That's when we get some of the bigger severe weather seasons. Normally, 2012 is a good example of that.
Which
2011
was happening last year. It was happening last year.
Yeah.
We were like, the oceans are warming. We're probably I thought, I'm like, I don't know if we're going to see a 3-year, because it's only happened 3 times ever in history.
Yeah,
this
was the third time ever we had 3 La Nina years in a row. So is it ever going to end? I think that's the question.
Hey, we're going to find out soon. We're going to find out soon here. So this is on everybody's mind. With the culmination of the last 3 years, there's no question about it. We've dealt with drought more times than we haven't. In fact, I think it was December of last year, 2022, we had the most percentage of drought across the United States ever. And that goes even beating 2012. Correct me if I'm wrong on that note as well.
Yeah. Last fall, when the drought spread east of the Mississippi River dried up. It was the most expansive we've had drought conditions ever for the United States. Yeah, beating out 2012. So certainly continues to be, it's calmed down east of the
Yeah.
Mississippi, but still the plains really struggling. And there has been some moisture this winter, especially Nebraska and Iowa. And
Quite
so
a
this
bit.
just goes to show how much of a
Yeah.
deficit that they've had over the past year.
Yeah. That's a good point because it's hard to you can't erase 3 years worth. I mean, you're not going to do that in a few weeks, even a few months, but you can improve it going into the next season. And I think that's a super big and important thing. And this is what I wanted to segue into is the good news here. And a lot of people going into spring into summer the last few years haven't had a lot of good news because we went through with the aridity index, a lot of dryness carrying over from fall and into winter, which leads into spring into summer. It's kind of the opposite this year, at least what's going on now, with increased jet streams. This is what is this? The last 30 or 60 days. And again, not for every single place in the central United States, but there is a lot more green here on the percent an anomaly versus normal than there isn't. And I think that is important because it has so much weight going into the spring of how this is verified throughout the winter and fall months here. What's your thoughts on this?
Yeah, for sure. The big thing that stands out to me is Nebraska and Iowa there, especially the past 60 days, well above normal precipitation in those areas. It was kind of that atmospheric river that moved through California as well. They've had some relief too. And again, it didn't completely knock out the drought, but it's been a little bit colder and it has been wetter than normal. And it's going to be colder and probably a little bit wetter than normal. That's a good sign heading into spring in those areas. Further south, though, Southwest Kansas, Western Oklahoma, Western Texas, still worried about those areas.
The good news is we're pushing moisture in, guys. This would not happen if there wasn't a change ongoing. You wouldn't get your atmospheric rivers, your extended Pacific jet streams. Like you wouldn't get those sustained features if we're in a strong La Nina. Typically, usually there's some El Nino influence that builds into that. And I think we're seeing a change. That's what we wanted to show here too. And this kind of pushes us further out. So we're going to start to get more into the long range forecast here, guys. Late February, early March. What do you see, Brett? I mean, to me, it looks a lot of the same.
Yeah, I think it's going to be very similar as we work into the first half of March. I think that maybe the start of March, there can be some colder shots of air. We had that polar vortex breakdown that has happened. It would not shock me if at least, the Northeast US, the Midwest, the Ohio Valley got in some colder shots of air, maybe some more winter, but that Southeast ridge in that Southeast area of high pressure and warmth doesn't completely go away. And so you're going to continue to get the clashing of air masses, and that's going to lead to above normal precipitation threats. And probably when you get that clashing of air masses, again, that's the severe weather threat. Winter weather too, we're seeing with this system this week. Winter weather up by Chicago, but severe weather to the south. I bet we see a lot more of that in the coming weeks. The area that's much above normal for precipitation, that would kind of be my bullseye for severe weather right now. And I do think even up into Iowa, even up into eastern Kansas, southeast Nebraska, you probably get some moisture and some chances. I kept northern plains at equal chances. That's one area I'm concerned that if it trends just a little bit colder, maybe some suppression. I know it's been a little bit drier there. That's maybe one problem area, at least to keep an eye on as we go further into spring.
Yeah, and to that note, though, I don't disagree with your equal chances there because just going back to the increased jet streams, moisture, more warmth, it at least can carry that opportunity for at least more moisture than what maybe models. Again, despite the drought response, it's just when you have active jet streams, it's hard to get widespread dry. Essentially. So this is basically us guys saying as we're going to the end of the month and as we're going into officially meteorological spring, March 1st, more of the same here as well. And I think we need to, something that I'm going to foreshadow here is there's a lot of green east of the Mississippi River, and there has been and there will be. So I know I've talked to a lot of farmers out there thinking about early planting here. That needs to be on your radar at the very least, that we're not seeing this pattern change. And to this degree here too, and I'll just go ahead and cover this in terms of our top March analogs. This is us saying that this isn't going to shut off anytime soon. Anytime you see a big shock to the atmosphere here, which these analogs here that we're showing you show that, we're going to keep this pattern around for the long haul here. So that just, you can just visibly see to the north, the colder air source, to the south and to the east, the warmer air source. In between is that corridor where those low pressure systems are going to phase here. So what additional thoughts you want to throw at this?
Yeah, I think March is, to be honest, a tricky forecast because of that SSW, because of that polar vortex breakdown.
Good point.
I think that there is some colder air probably at times because of it. But I also think that at times, if you're in the eastern ag belt, the eastern part of the country, I do think that you can have more spring-like weather. I think you kind of
Yeah.
have a good push and pull at times throughout the month of March, which again is why it's a very active look
Yeah.
on these analogs.
Yeah, and that's a great point too. And one of our participants, Kurt, had a great point. He said in the chat, he said, moisture in the northern plains is falling on frozen ground and runs off into rivers, not into soils. That is a very good point, because as you're going to see here in future slides, that is an area in the northern plains, as far as some of the southern plains, where that aridity index, some of the signals are already starting to show up. If there's going to be a level of dryness, it could be in some of those areas. So that's a very good point. That is a realistic kind of add in there, that in the northern plains, because of the colder air, that's like the only area that's cold. That could be a lot of that moisture may not be settling as much as it is here. We're 60 degrees outside. So that is a good point.
Yeah.
So that I wanted
sure.
to note that. So this is interesting to me. I saw this, with full clarity this morning from when you had sent it over, and I'm like, that's interesting, because this would suggest, correct me if I'm wrong, that a lot of these areas, Indianapolis, Des Moines, Columbus, many of it could be the potential for earlier, or however you want to say that, earlier frost freezes in terms of the 28 to 32. How would you characterize this, or what do you think the risk here was this?
Yeah. So, I think that a couple of notes. Number one, look at our kind of our northern areas here. Let's specifically look at North Dakota, Minnesota, Nebraska. Those areas normally are going to be a little bit later than the other areas. And so with the forecast probably getting a little bit warmer into May, those areas for the last 32 may actually be a little bit earlier than normal.
Okay.
It wouldn't shock me.
That makes sense. That makes sense.
But Missouri, Illinois, even Iowa there, maybe Indiana, maybe you're a little bit closer to normal. To me, Kirk, these aren't anything groundbreaking.
I was going to say, agree.
The analogs here are not crazy one way or the other, early or late. Generally, they skew a little bit earlier than normal in terms of the last frost and freeze, which would be a good thing for those looking to plant. But to me, it's not groundbreaking. And I did factor in the last couple of years, which have been a little bit later than normal.
Those have been groundbreaking. I was literally about to say that, because how many late season, we're talking like early May frost freezes have we had the last 3 to 4 years? I think almost every one of them. I think we've had 2 or 3 at least that I can think of, because a lot of the orchards around here and a lot of the apple farms have been just devastated. Because we're huge in going out to the apple farm, supporting local, and that kind of stuff. We have just had multiple years consecutively of those late season frost freezes. So this isn't the end all be all, but I'm encouraged because of the change in the atmosphere. This does make a difference, at least, percentage wise, probability wise. I would be encouraged. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, no, I 100% agree. That was exactly the point I was going to make, is should be into this April and May La Nina ending, where the last couple of years, it just persisted. And it persisted and persisted and persisted. And I think that's ultimately probably one of the reasons that has led to the later frost and freezes as of late. So
that makes sense here.
The fun.
Yeah, let's get into your breadbasket here. Why don't you kick us off in terms of La Nina? Does it ever end? What do you think?
Yeah, so we've been in a La Nina since mid 2020. So we're going on 3 years right now. The last time that happened was 1998 to 2000. And the atmosphere, what's been so rare about this one, up until this point, it's changing now, but up until this point, the atmosphere, the La Nina state was the strongest on record. In fact, a couple of the months in late 2022, I think were the second strongest overall. Beating out or just behind 2010. It was the strongest second or third year La Nina ever recorded in terms of the atmosphere. And again, the only year that was stronger, I believe, was 2010 into 2011. That was a first year La Nina. So it's been a very, very rare event. But you can see, if you look at this next chart here, we're starting to see maybe the final walk of it here, because we're starting to build in some of this warmer subsurface waters, and they're slowly starting to come up. So Kirk, why don't you talk about what is going on with this chart here?
Yeah, I watched this. So this updates every single week, guys. All we're looking at is the depth in the ocean across the equator, across a geographical area here. So we're looking at the surface down to, what is that, meters, 450 meters. Simple put, anywhere you see in color of orange or a red, that's warmer body of water versus to the normal. What we're looking at is it's expanding east, it's expanding towards the surface. That would be more of an El Nino-like tendency, or at the very minimal, away from a La Nina-like, which is colder than normal waters, and just not a lot of activity. So what we're looking at here is with time, we're noticing those warmer than normal waters working off to the east, closer to the surface. That's just, now again, La Nina, El Nino is not just simply based off oceanic temperature trends. There is the other half, maybe the more important half, is the atmospheric trends. There are two separate ways to categorize ENSO. This is one of them, but this is an interesting trend that does matter because it's not a coincidence. We've seen all of these low pressure systems, the jet stream getting more active. Well, the ocean and the atmosphere is starting to behave more together in something that's different from a La Nina. So these are talking at the very minimum. This graphic, whenever you see it, is simply temperatures versus normal sea surface temperatures, and it is more El Nino-like than it is La Nina. So it will take time. There is a lag. We're not just going to go into an El Nino tomorrow. That lag can be 3 months. That lag can be 6 months. So, and that is a huge difference when you're coming out of a La Nina. The time frame of that lag is everything here. And I know this is a slide that you created here, Brett, where there's never been a fourth year. So you kind of almost have to give that some merit that, hey, there's hardly ever been a 3-year. You have to at least mention the risk of a fourth year, but do you feel confident enough to say that at least this year we're going to move away from a fourth year and at least go ENSO neutral, or what do you think?
Yeah, I do feel confident enough to say that it's not going to be another La Nina. The other two cases that we can look at was 2001. I mentioned that on here. It went into a neutral ENSO state. The other one was 1976. It did go into an El Nino, so there is a precedence for it to transition from a La Nina to an El Nino. This chart that you're showing here shows all of the multi-year La Ninas on record. You can see that the big one that stands out is last year. From second to third year is really the only one that stayed that strong in terms of the MEI, which is the atmosphere and the ocean together. These would all suggest that this year we should finally, other than what happened last year, everything else would suggest we go into a neutral ENSO state or even an El Nino. There were several El Nino years on here. If we go into a neutral ENSO state like 01, then we're looking at years like 2018, 2017, 2012, 2006, and of course 2001. 2021 and 2008 weakened a little bit briefly, but stayed more kind of on the Nina side of things. We never really got out of it completely in those years. The only reason I even mention them is because there was brief weakening of the Nina in those summers, but not completely.
And one thing too, as we went into March last year, we started to see there were differences between what was going on in the ocean and the atmosphere. There was almost like we would come up with the phrase or El Nina or La Nino, because it was a mix of both. I feel like the ocean and the atmosphere are way more coupled together this year and more in unison. That would at least lend to a change happening. So is this going to be an El Nino? Hard to say. At the very least, it's something different and more of an ENSO, ENSO neutral here. So this is another slide here real quick, and I'll let you touch on this too. Obviously we've covered there's never been a fourth year here, but what are we noticing in terms of the models? What are some biases? What are the issues that these models have in situations like these?
Yeah, we've seen the past couple of years data try to rise us out of La Nina, at least take us into a neutral state. And it's this spring barrier that we talk about a lot. Between winter and spring, seasonal data has a very hard time forecasting what's going to happen with La Nina and El Nino. And so for the past couple of years, they've been rising it to a neutral state, right? Well, that never really happened. Again, brief weakening in 2021, but other than that, we've been straight La Nina now for 3 years. This year, instead of taking us into a neutral state, they're trying to take us to an El Nino. So I'm a little bit cautious on going full in on El Nino when they've had such a warm bias as of late. But our best model suite over the past couple of years has actually been that NMME model. And basically, it's a suite of a whole bunch of different American models. Right now, it's forecasting a neutral ENSO state through really the start of summer, and then forecasting a new warm neutral to weak El Nino. It's kind of right on that line. You can see that red box there indicates El Nino territory. So it does get there. But I will also note that the latest run weakened it a little bit. It wasn't quite as strong with the El Nino as the previous run. If we do get into an El Nino, recent years, 2015, 2009, which is the closest evolution if we were to do that, 2004 and 2002 would be
Yeah,
analogs. And Kirk, there's a big difference, and we're going to talk about
there's
this.
huge.
This
Yeah,
is a massive difference, whether we stay in the neutral territory or we
yeah.
go into the El Nino territory. I mean, we're talking massive implications.
Yeah, it's massive in terms of temperature and precipitation, where it sets up. Does it erase the drought? I mean, it really has a major impact on just one thing, the jet stream. How active is the jet stream here?
Yeah.
So the best that we can do, full clarity, guys. We can give our best research in the trends, but in July, can we full 100% certainty say, yeah, we're going to go into an El Nino or it's going to level off? That's just not possible right now. There is a spring barrier because there's only been a few times ever on record we've ever been in a 3-year La Nina. So you have to take that with a grain of salt, more so going with the trends of this is more of a likelihood. It's not as a sustained certainty as maybe the last 3 years of going into a La Nina, what those impacts may be. The case study is a lot smaller here. So we've kind of covered this in a lot of research. So just to kind of keep this presentation moving along here, this is kind of our month by month, March, April, and May. You got temperatures versus normal on the top, and you got precipitation on the bottom here. What are your key takeaways from this, Brett? What are you seeing for the spring in terms of the progression and trend of what we're seeing right now?
Yeah, key takeaway here, and overall, I would say that spring probably slightly higher confidence than summer right now, given the ENSO state, but probably colder shots to start out spring, probably additional winter weather chances that we don't really want.
Yeah.
But I think that March and April have the potential for the ag belt to be a little bit colder. I think that March especially has the potential to be more active than normal with severe weather. And I think that it has a potential to be wetter than normal overall. Now,
Yep.
as we work into late April and into May, I do think that the pattern warms up. I think that maybe it could stay a little bit more active than recent years in May. But I do think that we end up warmer than normal in May. Is probably the warmest month of the spring.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense too. And when I think about the previous last 2 to 3 years, more of that La Nina taste, we've gotten a lot of late season, different versions of this, whereas we may get colder longer. That's why I like what you've mentioned here in terms of the risk that as we go more with time, we may get more out of that pattern, not necessarily precipitation, but it may be different. And I think that's the important note here, guys. If you take away that the spring here, it will have different tendencies as we go forward, especially with precipitation. We see a lot of carryover here. So just to wrap it up here, guys, this is when you combine all 3 months, the March, the April to May, and again, that's a lot of time. That's 90 plus days to kind of combine everything together. Here's your key takeaways here. I don't foresee the cooler than normal temperatures really getting away quickly, especially I would say through the first half of this, the first 2/3 of this across the northern plains. I think we're going to remain active. I think that shock in the atmosphere is going to continue. I would say active severe weather in Ohio Valley, Tennessee Valley, Missouri valleys, deep south. I say if you're in those locations, I think it's going to be active. There's going to be plenty of precipitation. Is there going to be planting delays? I would say if we keep this current regime, this weather pattern going forward, that's a possibility. And I wanted to mention that here. We're going to start to get that question a lot more often. If you're in the eastern part of the ag belt, that needs to be something we're thinking about with all of these precipitation risks going forward every single week, getting into March and April time. If this pattern proceeds to continue, that is a risk. I think that is my key takeaway. Anything here, Brett, before we kind of keep moving on to the summer signals?
Yeah, I 100% agree. It definitely looks like an active severe weather setup, especially I would say probably the plains and east, just more active than normal. I think that's the biggest thing here. And as you mentioned, 100% agree with the planting stuff.
Yeah, and a lot of times too, we don't get those earlier seasons or early hits of GDUs, growing degree units here. So I wouldn't expect probably major bouts of warmth because again, the jet streams are more active. A lot of patterns kind of move in and move out here, if you will. So guys, just before, and I wanted to give our paid sponsor, Sylvius Insurance Group, a quick shout out here. Again, all of this one and the future ones this year will be sponsored by them here. So they are a crop insurance group here. They're really driven by analytics, proprietary software designed to help customers see and manage their risk more effectively. So, and they do that through their performance and product comparison tools, including historical analysis and profit forecasting. So make sure to talk to Robert. He's a specialist with Sylvius To learn more, 574-933-3930. So make sure to give them a hit here. Great timing going into this next season here. So we're going to jump right into, and again, guys, I know there's a lot of text on here in the purpose to, we only have about 10 more slides left. So we're going to kind of keep these moving here, and we're not going to read everything, but why don't you summarize this overall slide for us, Brett? What are you seeing in terms of late spring, summer?
Yeah, so the summary here, guys, is just the number one biggest pattern driver is La Nina or El Nino as we work into the summer months. We've been in a La Nina for a long time. The models right now in the top right, they're trying to get us into El Nino territory. I would say about 50 or 75% of them, probably most of them, getting us into El Nino territory by the summer months. But this chart on the bottom indicates that, hey, they've been trying to rise this for a while. We
Forever.
need to be a little bit cautious here. Need to be a little bit cautious, because if we went full in on El Nino, there are major differences in the outcomes of summers between a neutral ENSO and a weak El Nino. So that's the main takeaway here, guys. Right now, I'm still a little bit hesitant to go full in on some of these models, as European model taking us into a stronger El Nino by the middle.
It's got a problem. It's got a big bias of taking us, just shooting us to the moon in terms of going from, it did the same thing last year. So I'm weary of that. One thing I just had a thought about too is, because of the back end of this last 3-year La Nina was so strong, I just get this feeling that we're going to see some residual of that. We're going to see a lag, a lot longer lag, maybe not a lot's the right word, but some longer lag into spring, early summer than what these models will show. And again, the only way we're going to know that is by tracking ENSO. How much are we really continuing to warm those waters, and how is the atmospheric responding? Because I will tell you guys right now, if we're getting into the middle part of April and we're going into May, and we're just kind of at this neutral ENSO, we're not really rising. That could be a problem for me in terms of dryness, or at the very, it would suggest that there, that moisture opportunity may be not as prevalent based on the past. Not going to mention specific years, but if we start to plateau that in about 45, 50 days, I will be concerned. At least that this may be not as favorable for precipitation, as what it once might seem. So that's my key takeaway here as well. And going on to this next slide, this is your bread and butter, man. I love this. Nobody else talks about this. This is the Aridity Index. Why don't you give people a 30,000 foot view of what this is and why it matters?
Yeah, this is a fun index. It's just simply the standard deviation of the high temperature departure and the standard deviation of the precipitation departure. And we've been watching this here the past couple of years, because we found that specifically in winter and probably even early spring, what happens with the aridity index, if it's very high, which are the brown colors there, it tends to be a precursor for dryness. You look at last year on the left here, there was a very high aridity index across Nebraska, Iowa, Kansas, Oklahoma, Texas, and look at where it was dry in the growing season, April to August.
It's crazy.
You look at the year before, 2020 into 2021, it was the northern plains. The aridity index had it. It expanded a little bit further south into those months, but the precursor once again was there, even on the West Coast, really, guys. The precursor was there in the previous winter, that it was going to be dry in the following growing season. And so what we want to do is look at how we are this year and see what that may give us clues of into the
change
into spring and summer. And this is way different. This is way different than the past couple of years. To me, this is a wetter risk for the Western plains, specifically the Northwest plains and out west into the Mountain West, Nebraska, parts of South Dakota, maybe even into parts of Minnesota there. Now, where you could still have concerns would be Western Texas, Southwest Kansas. And I think that this area is probably going to improve over the next couple of weeks. But right now, parts of the Mid-Atlantic and the Eastern Ohio Valley, maybe at the very least, not as wet, but because I do think that this is probably going to decrease a little bit and be a little bit wetter here, given the pattern coming up. But right now, at least that's an area to watch, because if that eastern ridge continues to pump up this spring more than what the current data would suggest, that would be an area that right now, this would suggest a slightly drier risk to the forecast. Maybe not dry overall, but a drier risk to the forecast.
I would be encouraged if I saw this. There is a lot of green on this map. And what's interesting is it extends from California all the way into the northern plains. That tells me, and that's only because of one thing, the jet stream is more active. There's only one one thing in the whole entire world that you're going to get to change up that, and that is a more active jet stream, and that is in my opinion, more anti-La Nina tendency. You wouldn't get this kind of a response if you're just seeing a lack of jet streams here. So this is what we've been talking about the whole entire presentation of there is a risk. What does that mean? Well, we're teetering on it in terms of if we continue to warm up ENSO and get more El Nino-like tendencies here. You can see that blue map here that's kind of in the top left of those four graphics right there in the middle. That would be a cooler risk. Now, alternatively, if you kind of stall that out, or you don't warm it, or you cool it off even, it's the direct opposite. So that's why saying with certainty you're going to get one or the other, it's very difficult because small shift has huge implications. I mean, what are your thoughts on this outside of the unknown a little bit?
Yeah, I think I told Michael yesterday that I think this is the hardest forecast into the growing season that we've ever had, because it is such a fine line between a very hot, dry summer, kind of that leftover La Nina influence if we stay neutral, to a cooler and very active summer, a wet summer, if we go into an El Nino. And I think the best that we can do at this distance is kind of combine the two ideas. There's probably not one perfect year, but this would suggest, hey, some kind of residual leftover La Nina influence, southern plains, maybe not quite as active to the north as well, but some El Nino influence also starting to come into play. And you can almost see on the analogs there that jet, as you mentioned, kind of extending out west and maybe getting some moisture over the top of a ridge south. And maybe some drier risk southeast. So that's where we're at right now. It's not a dry forecast, but it's not a completely soaked one. But you can see what could happen here, guys, depending on what happens with the ENSO state. If we go a little bit higher, it's a wetter risk. Go a little bit lower, it's a drier risk. Given the data right now, maybe a slight lean towards the wetter risk. But we also have to factor in the Pacific Ocean, which has been very cold in terms of the state, a cold PDO, a negative PDO.
Yeah, let's just go into that.
And yeah, right here. So the West Coast, those colder than normal waters, that's a negative PDO. It did rise, but if this were to continue, it would be a slightly hotter and drier risk to the forecast. But I think the El Nino state, that's the bigger factor right now. This is something to keep in mind, but the bigger factor is that whether we get into an El Nino or not.
Yeah, I would say you did a great job explaining there that number one is ENSO. We're looking at the tendency there, and how ENSO evolves will have a huge impact on the PDO. So that makes a lot of sense, because if you rise ENSO, you're going to get less of a negative PDO, and that just simply means that you're going to overall extend that warmth over and add in moisture here. So it's going to make sense, guys. If we start to notice that ENSO is going to cool off, you're not going to get away from your negative PDO, and that's why it's a hotter and drier risk. That's all you need to know in terms of this that one affects the other here. So that's why the trend, I'm going to say it again, the trend is so important over the next 2 months. How that trends will determine the summer forecast. So that's what we're going to be watching here. So I know we've gotten some questions. What is the actual forecast kind of going into spring, into summer? This is our best bet. It makes a lot of sense to me here, guys. And again, based on that trend, some of this can evolve here a little bit. But what I agree with here are a couple things, that it's not overwhelmingly warm, which makes sense with an active jet stream. When you're adding in more moisture, it's just the law of I forget which exact law it is, but it's harder to warm up things that have more moisture in it because of the contents. It's more dense versus soils that are dry are easier to get hotter and warmer. So because of the more moisture chances, it makes sense that we're not going to be necessarily as warm. Now, I'm not saying it's going to be the coldest summer on record, but when you think about the last 2 or 3, I mean, how many summers have we had where we're breaking records of heating or cooling demand? I mean, a lot of them, most of them. So this would at least tell me that because of the change in ENSO, there's a change here.
Yeah, for sure. And if we were to go into an El Nino here, the risk would be that the equal chances area maybe turns below normal. El Nino summers are a little bit cooler. If we were to turn a little bit cooler, the moisture threat would probably expand further south into parts of Kansas and Missouri and Iowa too. So I think that's the big thing to watch right now, is just what El Nino does. And it's the middle of February, but we've shown that there can be some skill forecasting at this distance. Again, it's just which way do we lean? Do we lean a little bit lower with ENSO or a little bit higher towards El Nino? Again, right now, just based on the subsurface waters, based on all of the model data, think it's slightly cooler and wetter is the
Yep.
risk right now.
I know I've gotten a lot of questions, and there are a lot of questions. Just to answer to the best of my ability, is there as much weather risk premium in the markets? Let's give an example, the agricultural markets. Is there as much as the last 2 or 3 years? And I could say pretty confidently that there is not. Because of what's happened, we've added in more moisture. Some of the areas in drought, in fact, a lot of the areas in drought are seeing nourishing moisture, and the tendency of that to continue is higher than it is to not. So I think more available moisture has a better probability than the alternative. So I've gotten a lot of questions on that. I wanted to answer that as clear as possible, that I think the risk here, now again, the slide that I'm going to take it in here, is that risk. Where are we going to, what is the risk, going forward if there is one? I don't think it is the hotter solution. I think based on what's on, correct me if I'm wrong too, the tendency would just be maybe that it's even cooler. So that would be more beneficial. So I don't think there's necessarily the risk that we're going to jump right into a 2012. I think it might be the opposite. What do you think?
Yeah, no, I 100% agree. To me, this is more along the lines of a 2009, which was
Yeah.
generally a cooler and more active summer. But again, it's a fine line, Kirk, and
Yeah.
we just have to be transparent with that if these models fail again, then something like our forecast is probably going to be pretty spot on.
Yeah. Yep.
If it goes even lower than that, then that's when we'd be having some concern.
Yeah.
So, I would say that if we're in April and we haven't really risen ENSO much and it's kind of stalling out, that's when red flags start going off and the hotter and drier talk could return.
Yeah. And we're likely, just to back it up another slide, this would be more of that research we would gravitate to if that were to happen. That is the risk here. This is our kind of current thoughts in terms of summer. And what I like about this too, not to spend too much time, is it at least is transparent on the southern plains, and even the northern plains, into the southern Canadian prairies. I mean, gosh, how many of the last 2 or 3 years in the growing seasons have we just been dealing with drought? And that's just us acknowledging that, hey, even with the increased moisture chances, the likelihood there of that we're totally eradicating it is a little bit lower. I think we could be dealing with still below normal precipitation. A lot of the analog years history would tell us that that's still the case. If there's areas of drier to bloom and blossom still, I think northern plains, southern Canadian prairies, southern plains, areas in between, a little bit better for moisture risk here, but those would be the areas to watch. So not to take away from there too. This isn't like everything's perfect. Everywhere's going to get rain. There is still risk with the residual of La Nina and just the residual of the last 2 or 3 years that further down north and to the south here. That's the risk of the drier, maybe a little bit warmer too as well. So any last remarks, Brett, for kind of your spring or into your summer, anything that we didn't think about, or anything that you just thought about that you wanted to include, but kind of before we move on?
No, I think we've pretty much covered everything. I know we had a couple of questions in here about the actual severe weather forecast. I didn't draw a map for it, just because I think it's a generalized, more active than normal. I had actually plotted some analogs for it, and it was just a messy look, just because it was, most places were a little bit more active than normal. So this is kind of the thing that I would go on. I think that for pretty much all of the ag belt, maybe not Texas, Southwest and Central Texas. But I would say most of the Ohio Valley, Mississippi Valley, Midwest, for Midwest and Northern Plains, Central Plains, it's probably going to be more like April and May. And again, that's one of the reasons I didn't draw a map, because I think that the season starts out slower there. I think that it starts out in the Ohio Valley, the Tennessee Valley, above normal severe weather, March and into April probably. And then maybe that threat starts to shift further northwest. But I wouldn't say that there's one area more than another that has better above normal severe weather risk or below normal, if that makes sense. I just think it's more active than normal.
I would say, even to your point, the evolution of how severe weather evolves, starting in the deep south, the Tennessee River, and moving to the north, that's more normal. It's just maybe more reports, more activity within that normal system, if you will. That's kind of what I think. It's just not necessarily that it's moving west quicker, that it's just more producing reports, essentially. So I know we answered the question on California, southwestern U.S. drought conditions. We've seen improvement. It's not eradicating it all, but we've seen improvement. And given the trend away from La Nina towards El Nino-like tendencies here, I think there's good benefit that can continue. Again, I don't think it's going to be a constant flow, of moisture. Everything is going to be eradicated from that drought. I think that there will be better chances to help that than to hurt it. Is I think the main takeaway there too. So let me see here, guys. Make sure to shoot us some questions too in that Q&A box, or you can shoot it in the chat, whichever you want answered. We would love to answer those questions here. Somebody did ask, this is a good question. Very curious in regards to the sudden stratospheric warming coming up and your thoughts on its impacts this March to the Ohio Valley. So I'll throw that one to you, Brett.
Yeah, the sudden stratospheric warming event has gotten a lot of attention on social media. There's no doubt about it. But it's very important to keep in mind that it is not the be-all, end-all. Just because one happens does not mean it's going to get cold. We've had years where it did. 2018, very cold March and April, and years where it didn't. 2007 was a very warm March. I think that we're still kind of in the phase where we're trying to determine what exactly the influence is going to be. Generally, it's a colder wrist of the forecast. But I think what may end up happening is into March, it can lead to more of a high pressure near Greenland, which can lead to some colder air in the northeast part of the country at times. And I think especially maybe the first half of March, maybe there can be some colder air, some colder shots of air, more availability. But I don't think the eastern and southeast ridge goes away completely. And so what ultimately I think is going to allow to happen is just some crazy storm systems with big cold fronts, powerful gradients, severe weather, winter storms, all of it. Could that mean winter storms in the Ohio Valley further south? Yeah, it's not impossible. The European model, some of the data is already trying to suggest that next week. So I think it means that winter isn't completely over, but I don't 100%. Think it necessarily means that we're locked into a super cold, snowy pattern for the entire month of March.
Yeah, it's a double-edged sword, guys. It means that potentially for some areas the cold source isn't necessarily going away. I think that's a good baseline for that. And I think number two, the jet stream and the active storm track isn't going away. It's just a matter of timing. History would tell us it's harder to get the colder air influence to phase at the perfect time for a big Ohio Valley snowstorm. Not impossible. It's happened. You just have to get that timing right, I think is the overall takeaway there too. We did have a question. Will invitations to future webinars go out to current attendees? Not sure on the specifics of that too. This recording will go out to, and we'll push it out to those that have missed it, or even those that want to review it later as well. We're going to email that as well. So we want to make sure to clarify that as well. And then I also did want to show, just in case people had joined in, the middle part, I did want to show kind of our month by month in terms of March, April, and May. And just to recap this here, guys, if there's some colder air influence, these clashing of air masses, and what Brett and I had discussed is over the next 45, 60 days, 1 to 2 months, that's likely just going to continue for the Midwest and Northern Plains. Not seeing huge amounts of signal for just widespread warmth. That doesn't mean that we're not going to have days like it is out here today where it's 50, 60 degrees, but those are not likely to necessarily be sustained. It's, with the activity of the jet stream being, more than normal, increased chances for precipitation and cooler than normal just kind of makes sense. If there's a risk for warmer, maybe not as active, we'll have to see. It's towards the back end of the spring, towards that. I think that's what I want to say is the May forecast, I think, is really tricky. I think if there's a room based on ENSO, how the atmosphere evolves, May is that month. What do you think on that? Is that your month too? Do you have a different month?
Yeah, I'd say May into June. I mean, spring is always a difficult season to forecast, just as we transition from winter. But as far as, I would say, especially for precip, May into June is probably the most difficult right now. I feel pretty good about March and April precipitation, a little bit less confident with March temperatures just because of the SSW. But I feel pretty good about where our maps are right now in terms of precipitation the next 2 months. I think that the ENSO stuff is a big influence on precipitation May into June. That would be kind of the month to watch, I think.
100%, guys. And I did want to give us a quick shout out, obviously to our sponsor number one, Sylvius Insurance Group. I want to give them a quick shout out. Make sure to get a hold of them. Their crop insurance, they do a fantastic job. Bob has been great to work with and communicate with in terms of, meeting those needs. Obviously, if you're in the agricultural space, give them a shout. They would love to help you out with all of your crop insurance needs. But I also wanted to give our team, there's been a lot of effort into, especially Brett and our team of meteorologists, to getting this webinar going here, as it is available for free. And this is something we do every day. And Brett is the long range specialist, as I want to call him, no matter what he thinks. I think he's great at the long range here. And we house all of this stuff in our weather porthole application here. It's location specific, got everything from videos to long range videos to real-time radar data to real-time current conditions. You can actually chat with myself, with Brett. We're real human beings. We're not robots. You can actually chat with us 24/7. So that's one of the things that I love about our service here. Again, the application is called the Weather Porthole. Here's a quick kind of sneak peek in terms of what that looks like. It's an application on your phone. It's also web-based out there as well. So we would love to work with you and your business. It's a very affordable investment in terms of what you get, reducing that weather risk in terms of your operations out there. So Brett, I want to know, what are your last remarks before we end here today? Thank you everybody also, for joining in here today and for giving us the time out of your day here today. So what are your last remarks here, Brett?
Well, I think here, this is going to be a big test. I think this is a big test of model data. It's a big test of us just to see if we can stay ahead of what's going to happen, because it's a very tricky evolution here. It's one that we've never really dealt with before. And I think just finally, I want to thank Sylvius again for working with us. Robert actually, or Bob, he actually mentioned that they are the largest independent agency in the US.
Wow.
So that's awesome.
That's great
that we have them on board and they're able to sponsor these webinars. They sell throughout the country. So anywhere, anyone watching this, be sure to give Bob a shout. His contact information is there. And I really think that this year is different. I think that's probably my big takeaway, is that this is not quite like the last couple of years. We're already seeing some differences, both with the increase of your weather, but also just feels different as we work into the summer months as well. Maybe not quite the hot and the dryness that
I'm good with different, man. I am good with something different. And hopefully, we're a long ways away, but we're still in winter here, but hopefully that means something different for next winter. And I am tired of no snow, and we'll see. We'll have to see. Stetson, I saw your question in there, and this is the if La Nina comes back. Go ahead and take a screenshot of that real quick. I wanted to make sure to not miss this. But that's it for us, guys. We appreciate everybody's time here today. Brett, thank you, and to the entire team meteorologists for all the effort put into this. And we will be back in a couple more months for our summer one here. But if anybody has any questions, we would love to partner with you and your business. Contact us at sales@bmwx.com. We appreciate everybody joining, and that is it for us for now. So, all right, guys, we'll talk to you soon.